Welcome to The Adventure of the Phantom Assassin, a Sherlock Holmes adventure from the series Shadows of Empire. The Unseen Cases of Sherlock Holmes, playing in the year 1894. Though I have published many of my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes's cases, there exists another collection, one compiled not for public amusement, but from classified Foreign Office files. These accounts detail our entanglement in the great game of empire, navigating a world of colonial intrigue where the slightest misstep could unravel the dominion. Our first such case, which I have called The Adventure of the Phantom Assassin, was a truly terrifying affair. Chapter 1. It was upon a dreary November evening that the strange case of Lord Ashworth first came to our attention. A persistent weeping rain slicked the London pavements, and the gas lamps of Baker Street cast long, shimmering reflections upon the black river of the road. Within our sitting-room, the fire crackled a cheerful defiance against the gloom, and I had settled into my armchair with a recent treatise on naval pathology. Holmes, however, was in one of his blackest moods, pacing the length of the room with his head sunk upon his chest, a restless energy evident in his every sharp turn. Suddenly he stopped and cocked his head. Before I could perceive a sound, he had already identified it. A moment later, I too heard it, the heavy, purposeful tread of a man ascending our 17 steps. The sound was familiar, carrying with it the unmistakable weight of official business. That will be Gregson. I should know the sound of a Scotland Yard boot anywhere, but this one is heavier than usual. He carries the burden of a puzzle he cannot solve. Sherlock Holmes responded. As if on cue, a sharp rap echoed from our door. I admitted Inspector Gregson, his sturdy form framed in the doorway, his coat glistening with rain. His face, usually a mask of professional confidence, was etched with lines of profound vexation. "Mr. Holmes, Watson, a dreadful night. I hope I do not intrude, but this is a matter of the utmost urgency, and, I must confess, of the most baffling nature," replied Inspector Gregson. "On the contrary, Inspector, you are a tonic for a mind starved of stimulation. Pray, take a seat by the fire and tell us what affair has brought you from Whitehall in such a state," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Gregson sank into the offered chair, his relief palpable as the warmth of the hearth began to chase away the evening's chill. He wasted no time on pleasantries. "It concerns Lord Ashworth of the Colonial Office, a man of great importance and, it would seem, a great many enemies. In the past fortnight, he has been the target of 3 separate assassination attempts." Inspector Gregson replied. "Good heavens, has he been harmed?" commented Dr. John Watson. "And that, Doctor, is the heart of the mystery. He has been struck each time, yet he remains perfectly alive. Unharmed, even," answered Inspector Gregson. Holmes, who had been lighting his pipe, paused with the match poised halfway to the bowl, his eyes glinting with a sudden, sharp interest. "An assassin who fails 3 times at close quarters? That suggests an amateur of the highest order. And yet I suspect the details are more singular than that," deduced Sherlock Holmes. "Singular is the word, Mr. Holmes. The first attempt was in his study. A window left ajar, a sudden sting in his neck. He saw nothing, heard nothing. The second, whilst walking through St. James's Park. The third, stepping from his own carriage. Each time the same result. A small dart, no bigger than a lady's sewing needle, is found upon his person. He is instantly overcome by a complete paralysis, lasting no more than an hour, after which he recovers with no ill effects whatsoever," remarked Inspector Gregson. I stared at the inspector, dumbfounded. An assassin whose weapon merely inconvenienced his victim was a concept so absurd as to defy belief. Holmes, however, was now alight with intellectual fervour. He set down his pipe, unlit, and leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Fascinating. This is not incompetence, Gregson. This is design. A message is being sent. To paralyze, but not to kill. It is a demonstration of power, a threat of what could be. The agent is clearly a sophisticated poison, likely of Eastern origin, which produces a curare-like effect without fatal toxicity. The assassin is no bungler. He is a master of his craft, capable of delivering a fatal blow at will, but choosing not to. This is infinitely more interesting than a common murder," declared Sherlock Holmes. "That is what we fear. Lord Ashworth's colonial reforms have trod on some very dangerous toes. We have guards, but this phantom slips through them as if they were mist. We need your eyes on this, Mr. Holmes. We are entirely at a loss," Inspector Gregson answered. Holmes rose from his chair and began to pace once more, but this time his step was light and full of purpose. The fog of his earlier mood had been utterly dispelled by the tantalizing winds of this new and extraordinary problem. "I should be delighted to look into the matter. A non-lethal assassin presents a contradiction of the most stimulating kind. Watson, pack your service revolver. We shall call upon Lord Ashworth in Belgravia first thing in the morning. I must meet the man who can inspire such elaborate and peculiar malevolence," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. The hansom cab rattled over the cobblestones, its rhythmic clopping a familiar London refrain against the grey afternoon. We were bound for Belgravia, and the gravity of our errand seemed to press in with the encroaching fog. Beside me, Holmes was silent, his long, thin fingers steepled before him, his gaze fixed upon the passing facades of the great houses. He had scarcely spoken a word since Inspector Gregson's departure, lost in that profound concentration which so often preceded a triumphant display of his powers. "Watson, you observed Gregson's boots, did you not?" Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. "I cannot say that I did, Holmes. My attention was on his rather incredible tail," Dr. John Watson inquired. "A pity. The clay upon them was of a reddish hue, unique to the new excavations near Whitehall. He came to us directly from the scene of the latest attack on Lord Ashworth. He is a man of action, our Gregson, but one who often walks without seeing," Sherlock Holmes said. Before I could reply, our cab drew to a halt before a formidable stone edifice. A uniformed constable stood sentinel by the door, his presence a stark confirmation of the peril within. As we alighted, the heavy oak door swung open, not with a welcoming creak, but with the well-oiled silence of a bank vault. A manservant led us through a hushed vestibule into a library panelled in dark mahogany. A fire crackled softly in the grate, its low hiss the only sound in the room. Two men rose to greet us. The first was tall and imposing, with a stern, hawkish face and eyes the colour of a winter sky. This could be none other than Lord Ashworth. His voice, when he spoke, had the timbre of iron. The second man was younger, with the erect bearing of a soldier, his face tanned from a sun more ferocious than England's. He stood a respectful pace behind his superior, his gaze sharp and watchful. "Mr. Holmes, I am grateful you have come. This is my aide-de-camp, Captain Arthur Davies," remarked Lord Ashworth. We exchanged brief pleasantries. Captain Davis offered a nod that was as clipped and precise as a military salute. There was a profound stillness about him, the quietude of a man trained for sudden and decisive action. "I shall not waste your time with diplomatic niceties. I am reforming the administration of our more troublesome territories. Such work involves rooting out corruption, inefficiency, and those who profit from instability. It has, as you might imagine, made me a number of powerful enemies." He spoke of supply contract fraud in the Punjab and illicit diamond trading in the Cape Colony, his words painting a picture of an empire's hidden, festering wounds. As he detailed the specific measures that had provoked such ire, I chanced to look at Captain Davies. For the briefest of moments, as Lord Ashworth mentioned a new appointment in Calcutta, a flicker of something unreadable passed across the captain's face. It was not dissent precisely, but a sudden, intense stillness, a hardening of the jaw that was gone as quickly as it appeared. Lord Ashworth, deep in his oration, saw nothing, but I saw from a slight narrowing of my friend's eyes that the tiny detail had not escaped Sherlock Holmes. "And these attacks, my lord, they are designed to terrorize, not to kill. A curious method for a determined assassin," explained Sherlock Holmes. "It is a war of nerves, Mr. Holmes, an attempt to drive me from my post through fear. But I shall not be moved by phantoms," responded Lord Ashworth. Holmes rose from his chair and paced once before the fireplace, the light glinting on his sharp features. His energy seemed to fill the sombre room. "The phantom has a method, and therefore he can be found. To do so, I must see the place where he last appeared. We shall proceed at once to your office in Whitehall, my lord, for the true nature of a serpent is best discovered by examining its nest," declared Sherlock Holmes. Lord Ashworth gave a curt, decisive nod, his expression one of grim approval. The consultation was over. The hunt had begun. Within moments we were making our preparations to depart, the quiet library now charged with a sense of urgent purpose as we readied ourselves for the journey to Whitehall. The following morning found us descending from a hansom into the stately shadow of the Colonial Office. The air, thick with the damp promise of rain, did little to lighten the gravity of our purpose. Inside, the great hall was a cavern of echoing marble, where our footfalls seemed an unwelcome intrusion upon the hushed industry of empire. Inspector Gregson of Scotland Yard, a stout man with an expression of bulldog-like determination, met us at the base of a grand staircase. His voice was a low grumble that suited the cavernous space. "Mr. Holmes, I confess I see little for you here. We have scoured the place. There is nothing. No sign of forced entry, no powder residue, not so much as a scuff mark out of place," replied Inspector Gregson. "It is often the complete absence of evidence that is in itself the most compelling evidence of all, Inspector," my friend replied coolly, his keen eyes already sweeping the ornate plasterwork above our heads, declared Sherlock Holmes. Gregson led us to Lord Ashworth's study, a spacious chamber panelled in dark mahogany and smelling faintly of old leather and sealing wax. The only sign of the previous day's alarm was a single constable standing stiffly by the door. The inspector pointed towards a large sash window overlooking the street. His lordship was standing there, he explained, gesturing with a thick thumb. He felt a sudden gust of wind past his ear, heard a faint thwip against the wall behind him, and that was all. A phantom, as his aide called it, replied Inspector Gregson. While Gregson spoke, Holmes had produced his pocket lens and was already on his hands and knees examining the plush Persian rug with an intensity that bordered on the fanatical. I heard the soft scrape of his cuffs on the carpet and the faint, rhythmic puff of his breath. He ignored the window, his attention fixed instead upon the wall of leather-bound books opposite. "You searched for a bullet hole, Inspector?" he asked without looking up. Observed Sherlock Holmes. "Of course we did. Found nothing but a tiny chip in the plaster, no bigger than a pinhead. Far too small for any known caliber," Inspector Gregson answered. Holmes rose to his feet and crossed the room in 2 swift strides. He ran his long, thin fingers over the wall, his touch as delicate as a surgeon's. He paused, his head cocked to one side, then produced a pair of fine tweezers from his waistcoat pocket. With infinite care, he worked at the minuscule imperfection Gregson had dismissed. There was a faint grating sound as he extracted a sliver of dark metal. He held it up to the grey light filtering through the window. It was scarcely an inch in length, a wickedly sharp dart, exquisitely machined and tipped with a glistening amber-coloured substance that had hardened upon its point. "Good heavens, Holmes, what is that?" responded Dr. John Watson. "This, my dear Watson, is the key. Observe the craftsmanship. This is not the product of a London workshop. And this resin, likely a potent toxin from some remote corner of the globe. Our phantom does not use a firearm, Inspector. He uses an air gun, one of tremendous power and almost complete silence." Gregson stared, his mouth slightly agape, the dart glinting between Holmes's steady fingers. The implications settled into the quiet room, more chilling than any bullet could have been. A silent weapon, an exotic poison, and an assassin who could strike from a distance with unerring accuracy. This is the work of a master hunter, Watson, one who has honed his skills not on the playing fields of Eton, but in the jungles of the subcontinent. A man of military discipline and immense cunning. As we took our leave and stepped back out into the bustling clamour of Whitehall, Holmes was lost in thought. The problem had crystallized. The dart was not merely a clue, it was a signature. "The Yard will search for a common criminal with an uncommon weapon," he murmured, his gaze distant. "They will fail. This affair has threads that reach into the highest echelons of the service, Watson. We require a different class of information entirely. It is time I paid a visit to the Diogenes Club," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Upon our mantelpiece, nestled within a specimen box, the small, deadly dart lay as a silent testament to our foe's audacity. Scotland Yard being at a complete loss, Holmes declared our investigation required an intelligence that did not rely upon the tramping of constables' boots. Thus our hansom cab was swallowed by the evening fog. its wheels a dull rumble on the damp cobblestones, until we drew up before the funereal and imposing facade of that most peculiar of London establishments, the Diogenes Club. Within its hallowed walls, silence was not merely a preference, but the primary, inviolable rule. The profound quiet was broken only by the soft rustle of a turning newspaper page, or the distant, almost perceptible clink of a glass. There, framed by the great bay window of the stranger's room, a familiar and immense figure was settled like a monument in his armchair. It was my friend's brother, Mycroft. Mycroft, declared Sherlock Holmes. Though a mere whisper, Holmes's single word seemed to resonate in the profound stillness. Mycroft Holmes did not so much as turn his head. Only his eyes, large and heavy-lidded, shifted in our direction. With a slight, almost indolent wave of a fleshy hand, he indicated an adjoining chamber. Once within the confines of a private chamber, the oppressive quiet lessened to a respectable hush, though the venerable scent of old leather and beeswax remained. Mycroft settled his great bulk into another armchair, which groaned in protest under the weight. He did not ask the purpose of our visit. He simply waited, a placid and living repository of all the secrets of the Empire. Colonel Sebastian Moran, I need to know his present occupation, declared Sherlock Holmes. Mycroft's expression remained impassive, yet a profound weariness settled into his voice, as though he were discussing a tiresome, though perpetually recurring administrative problem. Ah, Moran. He has graduated from being a mere predator in the jungle to a spider in the centre of a most unpleasant web. He is no longer a simple gun for hire, Sherlock. He has become a broker of chaos, replied Mycroft Holmes. His network? His agents? Replied Sherlock Holmes. He preys upon the discarded, disgraced ex-servicemen, cashiered officers, men with grievances against the very empire they once served. He finds them, gives them purpose, and uses their invisibility. They are his couriers, his eyes and ears. They move through London as ghosts, for who pays heed to a broken man in a threadbare coat? Mycroft Holmes said. As Mycroft spoke, Holmes began to pace the confines of the small room, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, his brow furrowed in fierce concentration. I could see the information slotting into place, each new fact a crucial strut in a logical framework he was already constructing in his mind. It is more than messages they carry. The attempt on Lord Ashworth was made with a weapon of singular design. Sophisticated, silent, remarked Sherlock Holmes. Mycroft blinked slowly, a deliberate gesture that signified a profound intellectual effort. He then let out a soft sigh, the sound of a man uniquely burdened by the weight of infinite knowledge. That would likely be the work of a Herr Fleischer, a German artisan of extraordinary talent in the field of pneumatics. He specialized in silent, high-pressure air guns for collectors and, shall we say, private military interests. He vanished from his workshop in Munich 2 months ago. We had assumed a rival government had secured his services. It seems, however, Moran has acquired him. Mycroft Holmes replied. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with an almost audible snap in Holmes's mind. Moran, it was clear, was no mere employer of thugs. He was an architect of terror, acquiring unique assets and building a silent arsenal. An entrepreneur of assassination, indeed. A German weapon master and a network of embittered soldiers. He is arming his new web. "Thank you, Mycroft. You have given me the thread," stated Sherlock Holmes. Without another word, Holmes turned on his heel and strode from the room. I offered a hurried nod to his brother and followed, leaving Mycroft to the silent contemplation of his club. As our hansom rattled back towards Baker Street, Holmes remained silent, but his eyes glittered with a fierce, cold light. I knew his mind had already left the quiet rooms of Pall Mall, now fixed upon the tiny amber-tipped dart that awaited our return. The weight of my brother's words seemed to have followed us from the Diogenes Club, clinging to the damp November air that pressed against our window panes. Back within the familiar, cluttered warmth of our sitting room at 221B Baker Street, the London fog was held at bay, yet a more chilling atmosphere pervaded the chamber. It emanated from the corner where Holmes, heedless of the late hour, was hunched over his chemical bench. The acrid tang of reagents mingled with our pipe smoke. A gentle hiss from a Bunsen burner was the only sound to break the intense quiet. Upon a glass slide, illuminated by the stark gaslight, lay the villainous little dart that had so nearly ended the life of Lord Ashworth. Holmes, a magnifying glass in one hand and a delicate pipette in the other, worked with a ferocious concentration, deaf to the world. Only a soft clink of glass on glass marked his progress. "Come, Watson, your medical eye will appreciate this," observed Sherlock Holmes. His voice, though low, cut through my reverie. I rose from my armchair and moved to his side. He had scraped the dark, resinous substance from the dart's tip into a small porcelain dish and was now subjecting it to a series of tests. A drop of sulphuric acid, a pinch of a crystalline powder. Each addition was observed with an unnerving stillness. "Is it one of the common alkaloids? Curare, perhaps," responded Dr. John Watson. "Far too crude for our phantom assassin. Curare is the tool of a savage. This is the work of a connoisseur of death," remarked Sherlock Holmes. He introduced a final reagent into a test tube containing a solution of the substance. I watched, fascinated, as the clear liquid flared into a brilliant, unholy violet, before fading just as quickly to a murky grey. Holmes set the tube in its rack with a decisive click, his back still to me. There is only one vegetable toxin in the known world that produces such a reaction. It is derived from the crushed petal of Aconitum caeruleum, the blue monkshood of the Assam-Burma frontier, remarked Sherlock Holmes. "The blue monkshood? I confess I am not familiar with it," Dr. John Watson commented. "Nor would you be. It is a paralytic agent of extraordinary potency. It does not kill directly, you see. It merely freezes the diaphragm, simulating a catastrophic failure of the heart. To a physician, it would appear a natural, if sudden, demise." Sherlock Holmes noted. A cold dread, entirely separate from the evening's chill, crept over me. The name of that remote region struck a terrible chord, echoing the intelligence Mycroft had shared not 3 hours before. "Good heavens, Holmes! Assam? Is that not where Colonel Moran's old regiment, the 1st Bangalore Pioneers, was stationed for nearly a decade?" commented Dr. John Watson. Holmes turned then. There was a low hum of triumph in his voice when he spoke, a sound more chilling than any reagent's hiss. The gaslight caught the grim satisfaction in his eyes, the expression of a man who has seen the final, critical piece of a puzzle fall perfectly into place. Precisely, Watson. The plant is exceptionally rare, and the process to extract this particular poison is a closely guarded secret of the local hill tribes. It is not knowledge one could acquire from a book. It requires direct, intimate experience of the region. This dart is not merely a weapon. It is a signature, left by a man who knows the darkest corners of the empire. It is the calling card of Colonel Sebastian Moran, replied Sherlock Holmes. The puzzle was indeed complete, yet the picture it formed was more monstrous than I had imagined. The phantom now had a face, and the method was no longer supernatural, but rooted in a deep and malevolent expertise. The sharp crackle of the fire was joined by the rhythmic creak of the floorboards as Holmes began to pace before the hearth, his long shadow dancing across the room like a restless spectre. We have the who and the how, but the why remains clouded. Moran is a mercenary. He does not kill for sport, but for profit. To unravel his motive, we must understand the forces arrayed against Lord Ashworth. We require intelligence not from the underworld, but from the very highest echelons of society, remarked Sherlock Holmes. The pacing stopped abruptly, the sudden silence pulling my attention. He had fixed me with a keen gaze. His energy shifted entirely from the scientific to the practical, his mind already leaping to the next move in our deadly game. And for that, my dear fellow, I shall need your particular diplomatic gifts. In the morning you will pay a call upon Lady Beatrice Foxglove. Her drawing-room is a nexus of precisely the sort of political whispers we need to hear, explained Sherlock Holmes. Following Holmes's urgent directive, I found myself the next afternoon before an elegant townhouse in Mayfair. The roar of London seemed to fall away as the door swung open, admitting me from the damp chill of the street into the hushed warmth of Lady Beatrice Foxglove's Mayfair residence. A grandfather clock ticked with a deep and steady rhythm in the hall, its sombre beat a counterpoint to the delicate clinking of porcelain that reached me from an adjoining salon. Lady Beatrice greeted me not with the frivolous air of a society hostess, but with the keen, intelligent gaze I had come to respect. She was a woman who understood the currents that ran deep beneath the placid surface of London society. A fire crackled softly in the grate, casting flickering light upon the polished silver of the tea service between us. So, Dr. Watson, Mr. Holmes has sent his most trusted ambassador. This business concerning Lord Ashworth must be grave indeed, replied Lady Beatrice Foxglove. Her voice was smooth and measured, yet held a note of steel that belied the comfortable surroundings. It is, Lady Beatrice, grave enough that Holmes feels we cannot rely solely on official channels. We require information that can only be gleaned through discreet conversation, from those who see and hear what Scotland Yard does not. Dr. John Watson added. I leaned forward, my cup untouched. The air was fragrant with the scent of the Darjeeling tea and the faint, clean aroma of lavender polish on the mahogany. Lord Ashworth's proposed reforms have made him enemies, that much is plain. But Holmes is particularly interested in the man closest to him, his aide-de-camp, Captain Arthur Davies. Ah, Captain Davies. His official record is impeccable, of course. A hero of the Afghan campaigns, utterly devoted to his chief, replied Lady Beatrice Foxglove. She paused, tapping a thoughtful finger against her teacup. The sharp, delicate click echoed in the quiet room. It is what is not in the official accounts that interests us. His service in India specifically. Any connections, any duties performed that might not appear in a military file. Holmes believes the key to this affair lies in a past that has followed these men home from the outposts of the Empire. Dr. John Watson commented. Lady Beatrice's expression grew serious. She looked past me, towards the rain-streaked window, her gaze distant. The Empire asks a great deal of its sons, Doctor. It asks for their courage, their loyalty, and sometimes their conscience. Men who serve in those distant, sun-scorched lands are often faced with choices and duties that would seem monstrous here in a Mayfair salon. They learn skills in the shadows and carry burdens we can scarcely imagine. Lady Beatrice Foxglove said. Her words hung in the air, a profound and sombre truth. Then, her decision made, she met my eyes. Very well. I have friends at the India Office, and wives of generals who hear more than their husbands think. I will make my inquiries. You shall have what I can learn of Captain Davies, and any other whispers concerning Lord Ashworth's political foes. Lady Beatrice Foxglove replied, You place us deeply in your debt. Dr. John Watson inquired, Consider it a small service for the stability of the realm, Doctor. Now tell me, does Mr. Holmes have a theory as to the weapon used in these phantom attacks? Remarked Lady Beatrice Foxglove. I hesitated, recalling the strange dart and the deadly poison Holmes had identified. I gave her a carefully edited version, omitting the direct link to Moran, as Holmes had instructed. As I took my leave soon after, stepping back out into the cacophony of the city, I felt our investigation had branched. While I pursued whispers in the drawing-rooms of the West End, I knew that at that very moment Holmes was likely donning some rough disguise, preparing to hunt for answers of a much harder sort in the gas-lit alleys and grimy public houses of the East. While I was engaged in the delicate diplomacy of Lady Beatrice's Mayfair drawing-room, Holmes had embarked upon a very different and more perilous line of inquiry. Upon my return to Baker Street that evening, I found him not in his familiar dressing-gown, but in the rough tweed and grimy cloth of a common labourer. The disguise was so complete that for a moment I failed to recognize the hawkish features beneath his pulled-down cap. The acrid scent of cheap tobacco and the damp chill of river fog clung to him. "Good heavens, Holmes, where have you been?" Dr. John Watson said. "To the heart of the beast, my dear Watson. If Colonel Moran is recruiting the finest shots in London, he will not find them at the gentlemen's clubs. He will fish in the murky waters of the East End, where former army marksmen, men with steady hands and unsteady fortunes, are to be found in abundance," Sherlock Holmes noted. He then recounted the events of his afternoon. As he spoke, I could almost feel the chill of the Wapping docks and hear the tide murmuring against the slimy wharf posts. He had adopted the slouch and gravelly cough of a discharged seaman, drifting through the gin palaces and low public houses where such men congregate. The air in these establishments, he described, was thick with the hiss of the gas jets and the clatter of tankards on sodden wood. and it was in one such den, a foul-smelling place near the Limehouse Cut, that his patience was rewarded. Huddled near a sputtering fire, a group of hard-faced men spoke in low, guarded tones. Their military bearing was still evident beneath their threadbare coats. Holmes, nursing a pint of stale ale, positioned himself to listen. The conversation, he told me, was a fragmented tapestry of old campaigns and present grievances. Soon, however, it turned to whispers of new employment, lucrative if dangerous. "It ain't a rifle as we know it," the man had muttered, his voice a low rumble. "No crack, no smoke, just a puff of air. They're calling it the ghost rifle." A younger man, his face pale in the gloom, had shivered, though not from the cold draught that rattled the window-pane. "And the man who pays," the younger one had whispered. "They say he sees everything. They say you don't refuse the Colonel," declared Sherlock Holmes. At the mention of that title, a sudden silence fell over the group. A log shifted in the hearth, sending a shower of sparks into the darkness. The men exchanged nervous glances, then swiftly changed the subject. But Holmes had heard enough. The whispers confirmed two crucial facts: the existence of a silent weapon, a feat of engineering worthy of Moriarty's late artificer, and the iron grip of fear that Moran exerted over his recruits. He stood now before our own fireplace, the disguise cast aside, his eyes gleaming with a fierce, analytical light. The distant clang of a ship's bell sounded from the Thames, a mournful note in the London night. "The fear is the key, Watson. It is a more potent force than greed. These men are not merely hired, they are conscripted by terror. Moran has his weapon and his network of skilled, frightened operatives. He has laid his board and arranged his pieces," Sherlock Holmes said. "Then he will surely strike again, and soon," Dr. John Watson commented. "Precisely. He has tested his method and proven its efficacy. Now he will aim for the final checkmate. Our task is to anticipate his move and shield the king before he is even aware of the shadow on the wall," replied Sherlock Holmes. The Olympian Club was an edifice of masculine tranquillity, a place where the low hum of conversation and the gentle clink of a decanter against glass were the only sounds to disturb the peace. Yet a gathering storm seemed to brew, a palpable tension I could not shake. Holmes had insisted upon our presence, and now sat opposite Lord Ashworth, his face a mask of casual interest that I knew concealed a mind working at a feverish pace. The air, thick with the scent of leather and old paper, felt heavy with anticipation. His voice was a low rumble, accustomed to command. "I must confess, Mr. Holmes, I fail to see the purpose of this vigil. My club is my sanctuary. No assassin, phantom or otherwise, would dare strike me here," Lord Ashworth answered. "His lordship is quite right," Captain Davies added, his tone clipped and professional as he stood at a respectful distance. "The members are vetted, the staff are loyal. It is the most secure place in London," Captain Arthur Davies replied. "It is precisely its reputation for security that makes it the most tempting of targets," Holmes replied coolly, his eyes never leaving the high arched windows that overlooked the street. "Pride, Captain, is the handmaiden of disaster," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. As he spoke, his body tensed. It was a subtle shift, almost imperceptible, but I had seen it 100 times before. His gaze was fixed on a point high above us, on the ornate cornices that lined the reading room. My eyes followed his, and then, in that same instant, my own eyes caught it. Not merely a flicker, but a shadow that detached itself from the deeper shadows. A brief, unnatural glint where the gaslight caught something metallic against the dark mahogany panelling. It was then that Holmes moved, his chair scraping violently against the floorboards as he launched himself towards Lord Ashworth. He shoved the nobleman from his chair with a force that sent him sprawling. A fraction of a second later, a sharp hiss cut through the air, followed by a solid thwack as a small feathered dart embedded itself deep into the leather of the very armchair Ashworth had just vacated. A collective gasp went through the room, and the murmur of conversation gave way to a deafening silence. "Good heavens, Holmes!" I cried, rushing to my feet. Dr. John Watson added. Holmes was already at the window, his gaze cast upwards into the gloom. He pointed a long, thin finger. "There!" he cried. My eyes followed his direction, across the street to the building opposite. For a fleeting moment I caught the silhouette of a man, impossibly perched upon a narrow stone ledge, before he seemed to melt back into the chimney stacks and vanish. The escape was audacious, a feat of acrobatics that left me breathless. How did you know?" he stammered, his face pale as Captain Davies helped him to his feet. Lord Ashworth answered. "I did not know, my lord. I calculated," Holmes stated, his voice sharp as he turned from the window. "Moran is a creature of vanity. After 2 failed attempts, his pride would demand a third, more public and more daring than the last. He seeks not only your death, but your humiliation," said Sherlock Holmes. Within minutes, the club was in a quiet uproar, with staff scurrying and members whispering in shocked tones. Holmes, however, was already outside, his eyes scanning the flagstones below the opposite building. I followed, and saw him stoop to pick something from the shadows of an alcove. It was a coil of dark rope, no thicker than my thumb, lying innocently on the ground. "Observe, Watson," he said, holding it out. His voice was low and intense. "It is light, yet woven with a fine metallic thread, giving it a tensile strength far beyond that of ordinary hemp. This is no common housebreaker's tool. This is the equipment of a mountaineer or a specialist soldier trained for alpine warfare." He coiled the rope carefully, his expression grim. Captain Davis had joined us, his military bearing unwavering despite the evening's events. He glanced at the rope, and for a moment his professional mask slipped. I saw not just a flicker, but a flash of cold recognition in his eyes, a tightening of the jaw, before his composure was restored as swiftly as it had vanished. "A soldier?" I asked. "So, one of Moran's network of marksmen?" Dr. John Watson commented. "Perhaps," Holmes mused, his gaze drifting to the captain before returning to me. "Or perhaps someone with a past even they would wish to keep buried. A man's skills, Watson, often tell a truer story than his words. We must look more closely at those who stand nearest the flame," Sherlock Holmes said. The damp chill of a London autumn had settled over the city, and the air in the park carried the scent of wet earth and distant coal smoke. A weak sun filtered through the thinning canopy, casting skeletal shadows across the path where Holmes and I awaited Lady Beatrice Foxglove. The memory of the previous night was still sharp in my mind. The hiss of the dart, the specialized rope dangling against the club's brickwork. It was a disquieting counterpoint to the gentle rustle of leaves under the boots of passing pedestrians. Presently, her carriage drew up, and she emerged, a figure of quiet elegance, her face grave. She dismissed her driver and approached us, the crunch of her footsteps on the path the only sound for a moment. Holmes removed his hat, his expression one of keen, almost hungry anticipation. "Mr. Holmes, Doctor, thank you for meeting me in such a public yet private place. I believe my inquiries have borne fruit, though it is of a bitter and most troubling variety," responded Lady Beatrice Foxglove. "We are entirely at your service, Lady Beatrice. Pray tell us what you have discovered," replied Sherlock Holmes. Her voice, usually so measured and light, was lowered, imbued with a seriousness that commanded our complete attention. She glanced about to ensure we were not overheard, then continued. "It concerns Lord Ashworth's aide-de-camp, Captain Arthur Davies. His military record is, on the surface, exemplary. However, with the help of a very discreet and old friend at the War Office, I learned of a sealed incident. It is a matter hidden from all but the highest scrutiny," replied Lady Beatrice Foxglove. I saw Holmes lean forward ever so slightly. His grey eyes were fixed upon her, his entire being a study in concentration. The distant clip-clop of a hansom cab seemed to fade into nothingness. "A sealed incident? Good heavens!" responded Dr. John Watson. "Indeed. During the Tirah campaign on the frontier, Captain Davies faced a formal charge of cowardice in the face of the enemy. It was alleged he abandoned a forward listening post. That action directly led to the deaths of 2 of his men." Lady Beatrice Foxglove replied. The words hung in the cold air. A charge of cowardice was the ultimate stain upon an officer's honour, a career-ending accusation from which recovery was seldom possible. Yet Davis was here, at the right hand of a man like Ashworth. And yet the charge was not pursued. It was dropped. "Why?" declared Sherlock Holmes. Holmes's question was sharp, like the snap of a dry twig. "Precisely, Mr. Holmes. The inquiry was abruptly terminated on the direct order of a senior officer, a General Matheson. It is worth noting that some years later, this same general was quietly dismissed from the service. The cause was financial indiscretions of a most scandalous nature." Lady Beatrice Foxglove answered. Holmes stood perfectly still, his thin lips pressed into a firm line. I could see the connections forming behind his eyes. Disparate facts were aligning themselves into a coherent and terrible pattern. A buried secret, a disgraced patron. This creates the most potent of levers, does it not? One need only find the man who knows where to apply the pressure, observed Sherlock Holmes. And that is the final, dreadful piece. My contact confirmed that another officer served in the very same theatre of operations, an officer known for his uncanny ability to collect compromising information on his peers. He made a career of knowing things that ought to have remained buried. Colonel Sebastian Moran. Lady Beatrice Foxglove replied. The name fell between us like a stone. Moran blackmailing a decorated captain into becoming a phantom assassin, using a past sin to force him into a present evil. The scheme was one of diabolical simplicity, and it bore all the hallmarks of that fiendish intellect. Holmes turned his gaze from Lady Beatrice to me, a strange, almost challenging light in his eyes. "Your contribution has been invaluable, Lady Beatrice. You have provided the keystone. Come, Watson, we must return to Baker Street at once. There are threads here that I believe you are now equipped to unravel," Sherlock Holmes said. The November rain lashed against the windows of our sitting room, each gust of wind punctuated by the distant, mournful cry of a foghorn from the Thames. Within, the air was thick with the acrid scent of my friend's strongest shag tobacco, a sure sign that he was nearing the culmination of some deep and complex problem. For an hour he had sat in silence, his long, thin fingers steepled before him, his gaze fixed upon the trifles he had arranged with such care upon the centre table. I had followed his gaze a dozen times, yet could see nothing but a grim collection of curiosities. A tiny, needle-like dart, a coil of exceptionally fine silken rope, and a small glass vial containing a dark, viscous fluid. At last he stirred, his grey eyes glinting in the gaslight. "Watson, I believe the time has come for you to demonstrate your own not inconsiderable deductive faculties. Let us review the evidence together," replied Sherlock Holmes. He gestured towards the table with the stem of his pipe, a schoolmaster inviting his pupil to the blackboard. "I am at your service, Holmes, though I fear my conclusions will seem clumsy next to yours," Dr. John Watson added. "Nonsense. Let us begin with the weapon, a blowpipe dart. Silent, accurate, and devilishly subtle. What does its use imply?" Observed sharply. "That the assailant wished to strike from a distance without the noise of a firearm, and that the poison it carries must be fearsomely potent to be effective in such a minuscule dose," commented Dr. John Watson. "Excellent. The poison is indeed a concentrated paralytic agent, a variant of a substance used by certain tribes along the northwest frontier. It requires great skill to prepare. Now, consider the second item, the rope. It was found snagged upon a drain pipe near the scene of the second attempt. What do you make of it?" Sherlock Holmes responded. "I picked up the coil. It was light, yet I knew it to be possessed of a tremendous tensile strength. The knots were tied with a peculiar and expert twist. This is the rope of an experienced climber, an alpinist perhaps. It is meant for scaling sheer surfaces, for moving where an ordinary man cannot go. It explains how the assassin could reach such impossible vantage points," Dr. John Watson added. "Precisely, my dear fellow. So, we seek a man with three distinct qualities. 1. Unfettered access to Lord Ashworth. 2. Expert knowledge of esoteric poisons from the Indian frontier. 3. The physical prowess and specific skill of a mountaineer. Now, Watson, who in our cast of characters fits such a unique and damnable description?" The fire crackled in the grate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden tense silence. The pieces began to fall into place in my mind with a dreadful, sickening velocity. The aide-de-camp's distinguished service in India, his athletic build, his constant, trusted presence at his master's side. My own voice sounded hollow as the name escaped my lips. "Good heavens, Holmes, it is unthinkable. Captain Davis?" Dr. John Watson inquired. He nodded slowly, his expression grim. "It is the only theory which accommodates all the facts. But a loyal soldier does not turn phantom assassin without a powerful motive. And that, my friend, is where Lady Beatrice's discovery provides the final, terrible piece of the puzzle, Sherlock Holmes said. Her ladyship's contacts at the War Office unearthed a ghost from Davies's past. A moment of hesitation during the Tira campaign. An action that, had it been officially recorded, would have stripped him of his commission and his honour. It was a secret buried by powerful friends, one that a man like Moran would surely unearth and exploit, Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Blackmail, I breathed, the full horror of the situation dawning upon me. Moran holds the man's entire life and honour in his hand, responded Dr. John Watson. He does indeed. Davies is merely the coerced instrument, the living weapon. Our true quarry is the man who aims him. And now that we know the assassin, Watson, we must use him as bait to catch the monster who pulls his strings, stated Sherlock Holmes. A new energy filled the room, dispelling the quiet contemplation. The hunter's glint was back in Holmes's eyes, and I knew that the time for deduction was over. The time for action was at hand. The grim reality of my deduction hung in the Baker Street air like a shroud. To know the villain's name was one thing, to bring him to justice was quite another. Holmes, however, wasted no time on contemplation. He snatched his coat from its peg and, with a curt nod, indicated I should do the same. Our destination was one I knew well, the grim, perpetually damp halls of Scotland Yard. The Yard is a necessary evil, Watson. We require a blunt instrument, and Inspector Gregson is the bluntest I know, Sherlock Holmes said. We found Gregson in his cramped office, a stack of reports before him, and a look of profound frustration upon his face. The air was thick with the scent of stale tobacco and ink. He waved us to a pair of hard-backed chairs, the legs of which scraped noisily against the bare floorboards. "Holmes, I suppose you've come to spin another of your fantastic theories. I've had my best men watching Lord Ashworth's residence. Nothing. It's as if the man is attacked by a ghost," Inspector Gregson said. "Because your men, Inspector, are watching the wrong man. The phantom is not some spectre from the street. He is already inside the house. I speak of Captain Arthur Davies," declared Sherlock Holmes. Gregson stirred, his mouth slightly agape. He then let out a short, incredulous bark of a laugh. "Captain Davies? Preposterous! The man is a war hero, Lord Ashworth's most trusted aide. I will not have his name slandered on the basis of some flight of fancy," responded Inspector Gregson. "It is no fancy. He alone has the proximity. He alone possesses the unique skills, honed, I should wager, in the Khyber Pass, to scale walls with the agility of a cat. And he is being blackmailed by a man who has every reason to see Ashworth dead." "Colonel Sebastian Moran," replied Sherlock Holmes. At the mention of Moran's name, the colour drained from Gregson's face. The inspector, for all his bluster, knew that name, and the profound evil it represented. Holmes pressed his advantage, his voice low and urgent. Moran has given him a choice: assassinate his superior, or have his own past sins laid bare. We have no time for a conventional investigation. We must force Davies's hand, tonight, Sherlock Holmes said. Gregson, his scepticism now replaced by a grim sense of duty, made the necessary arrangements with haste. An hour later, after a swift, handsome ride through the bustling city, we found ourselves in the cavernous, wood-panelled office of Lord Ashworth himself. The vast maps of the empire adorning the walls seemed to press in upon us, a silent testament to the burdens of the man who now faced us. His lordship listened to Holmes's proposal without interruption, his face a mask of stoicism, though I saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped the arm of his chair. "You wish for me to be the cheese in your trap, Mr. Holmes," remarked Lord Ashworth. "Precisely, my lord. You will work late, here, in this very office. Your window will be lit. You will present the most irresistible of targets. Davies will believe it is his final opportunity," stated Sherlock Holmes. A long silence descended, broken only by the solemn ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. Lord Ashworth rose, his posture ramrod straight, and walked to the window, gazing down at the darkening London streets below. When he turned back, his eyes held a steely resolve that I could not help but admire. Very well. If this is what is required to excise the treachery within my own house, then I shall play my part. "Inform your men, Inspector," said Lord Ashworth. And so the trap was set. As dusk bled into a cold, damp night, Gregson's men, disguised as workmen and loiterers, took up their positions within the shadows of the surrounding buildings. Holmes and I established our own post in an empty office across the square. From our vantage point, we had a clear view of the single illuminated rectangle that was Lord Ashworth's window. The city grew quiet, the rumble of traffic fading to a distant murmur. Now there was nothing to do but wait, and every scrape of a boot on the pavement below, every gust of wind through the alleyways, served only to sharpen the profound, waiting silence. The cold of the rooftop slates seeped through the soles of my boots, a damp and penetrating chill that seemed to mirror the tension of our vigil. Below us, London was a vast, sprawling beast, its distant murmurs punctuated by the lonely chime of a remote clock tower. Across the chasm of the street, a single rectangle of yellow light burned brightly, the window of Lord Ashworth's study. It was the flame to which we hoped our deadly moth would be drawn. "There's not a soul in sight, Mr. Holmes. My men have the street sealed tighter than a drum. If anyone so much as coughs in that alleyway, we'll have him," answered Inspector Gregson. Gregson's voice was a low grumble, his breath pluming in the frigid air. He shifted his considerable weight from one foot to the other, the rough scrape of his boot on the gravelled surface a harsh intrusion on the quiet. "That is precisely why our quarry will not be in the alleyway, Inspector. The phantom has struck thrice without leaving so much as a footprint for your men to follow. Such an assailant does not approach his work from the ground. He operates from above, like a hawk," Sherlock Holmes responded. Holmes remained perfectly still, a gaunt silhouette against the fading dark of the city sky. His gaze was fixed not on the illuminated window, but on the shadowed expanse of the rooftops surrounding us. It was then that I heard it, a sound so faint it was almost lost to the wind that moaned around the chimney-pots, a soft metallic grating, as of a latch being drawn on a nearby roof access hatch. Holmes cocked his head to one side. He raised a single cautionary finger. Gregson froze, his grumbling silenced. We waited, our collective breath held in the icy air. A moment later, a shadow detached itself from a larger mass of darkness some 30 yards along the roofline. The figure moved with a soldier's economy of motion, keeping low. He carried a long cloth-wrapped parcel. We watched, transfixed, as the man knelt behind the cover of a broad chimney stack. He laid the parcel down and began to unwrap it. A series of soft but distinct sounds carried to us on the night air. The dull thud of a wooden stock placed on slate, followed by the sharp, oily click of a barrel being fitted into place. Another click, precise and metallic, as a breech was locked. There could be no doubt. It was the sound of a powerful air rifle being assembled. "Now, Inspector," replied Sherlock Holmes. His voice was a mere whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a blade. Gregson needed no second bidding. He and his 2 constables moved with a swiftness that belied their size, their heavy boots thudding across the rooftop. The figure looked up, startled, the rifle still half raised. The beam from Gregson's lantern fell upon him, and I felt a profound shock of recognition. It was the loyal aide-de-camp, Captain Arthur Davies. He made no move to resist, no attempt to flee. The rifle clattered from his grasp onto the slates. He simply stood, blinking in the sudden glare, his shoulders slumping in an expression not of fear, but of utter, weary resignation. His face, caught in the harsh light, was etched with torment. "Captain Davies! In God's name, man, what is the meaning of this?" Inspector Gregson answered. The inspector's voice was a roar of disbelief and betrayal. The captain's reply, however, was spoken so quietly it was nearly carried away by the wind. "It is over, then. Thank heaven for it," replied Captain Arthur Davies. Holmes stepped forward into the lantern light, his expression unreadable. He looked from the exhausted soldier to the deadly weapon lying at his feet. "The phantom is a ghost no longer, Inspector. But a man may be haunted by more than one spectre. I suspect the captain's story is not his own," explained Sherlock Holmes. As the constables led the unresisting captain away, his strange words of relief echoed in my mind. It was not the reaction of a common assassin, but of a man freed from an intolerable burden. The great question was no longer who the phantom was, but what terrible power had compelled him to act. The interrogation room at Scotland Yard was a place stripped of all comfort. Its bare walls seemed to absorb sound, leaving only an oppressive silence, broken by the rhythmic ticking of a large clock. A single gas lamp hissed, casting long, dancing shadows that made the small space feel a tomb. Before us sat Captain Arthur Davies, no longer the immaculate aide-de-camp, but a man utterly undone. His uniform jacket lay discarded over a chair, his head bowed, his gaze fixed upon trembling hands clasped on the rough-hewn gable. "Very well, Captain. We know it was you on that roof. The question is why?" "Lord Ashworth placed his trust in you," replied Inspector Gregson. Gregson's voice was not unkind, but it was firm, the voice of a man who had heard 1,000 lies and expected another. Davies did not look up. He swallowed hard, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Trust. I forfeited the right to that name long ago, Inspector," remarked Captain Arthur Davies. His reply was a near whisper, hoarse with a shame so profound it seemed to pain him to give it voice. Holmes, who had been observing the man with a hawk-like intensity, leaned forward slightly. The legs of his chair scraped against the stone floor. "This is not about Lord Ashworth, is it, Captain? This is about Colonel Moran. He did not buy your loyalty. A man like you would not sell it. He found a lever, a past indiscretion, I should imagine, something from your time in the colonies that threatened not your life, but your honour," observed Sherlock Holmes. At the mention of his honour, Davis flinched as if struck. He finally raised his head, and in the gaslight I saw his eyes were swimming with unshed tears. The dam of his composure broke. The story came tumbling out, a torrent of fear and regret. He knew, Moran knew everything. An incident near Kandahar, a moment of hesitation, a charge of cowardice that was buried by a commanding officer who took pity on me. Moran unearthed it. He threatened to ruin me, to strip my family of its name, to make my children bear my shame. "I was trapped," remarked Captain Arthur Davies. He spoke of the phantom attacks, of how Moran had supplied him with the compressed air rifle and the knowledge of Ashworth's schedule. It was a masterful web of coercion, designed to make the captain the perfect, untraceable weapon. And yet you failed, repeatedly. The darts contained a paralytic agent, potent but not fatal. You are a decorated marksman, Captain. You could have killed him at any time. You were defying him, observed Sherlock Holmes. I could not become a murderer. I hoped that if I merely wounded him, Moran might be satisfied, that Lord Ashworth might be frightened into abandoning his reforms. I was a fool, said Captain Arthur Davies. His voice cracked on the last word. The confession had exhausted him, and he slumped in his chair. Gregson shifted his weight, a low grunt escaping him. "Why not come to us, man? Why suffer this alone?" answered Inspector Gregson. A fresh wave of terror washed over the captain's face, erasing the weary resignation. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a desperate, trembling hush that chilled me to the bone. "Because he gave me an ultimatum. After the last failure, he sent me a message. He said the next attempt must succeed. He said if I failed, or if I went to the authorities, he would not come for me. He would go for my wife, for my children. He described my little girl's walk home from her school. He knew everything," answered Captain Arthur Davies. A silence descended upon the room, profound and more terrible than before. The ticking of the clock seemed to be counting down the final seconds of Davis's ruined life. In that moment, the true monstrous nature of Colonel Sebastian Moran was laid bare. This was not business, it was cruelty for its own sake. Holmes's face was granite, his eyes narrowed to slits. I saw in them not the thrill of the chase, but a cold, implacable fury. The phantom had been caught, but the monster who held the strings remained at large. The November fog pressed thick against our window panes, muffling the ceaseless rumble of London's traffic to a distant, drowsy murmur. Within the familiar clutter of our sitting-room at 221B Baker Street, a profound quiet had settled, broken only by the soft hiss and crackle of the fire in the grate. The whirlwind of the Ashworth affair had passed, leaving in its wake a stillness that felt both welcome and strangely unsettling. Holmes sat opposite me in his armchair,
a thin blue haze of pipe smoke wreathing his sharp, aquiline features as he stared into the flames.
"It is a relief to have it concluded, Holmes, and yet I cannot help but feel a pang of pity for Captain Davies," Dr. John Watson said. Holmes drew on his pipe, his eyes still fixed upon the glowing coals. For a moment I thought he had not heard me. "Pity is a natural response, Watson. Davis was a good soldier caught in a villain's snare. Moran's true genius lies not in the execution of his crimes, but in his unerring ability to identify the precise point of leverage in a man's soul," replied Sherlock Holmes. "His confession at the Yard was harrowing. To think Moran held the man's family to ransom over some past indiscretion, it is the work of a fiend," Dr. John Watson replied. "It is the work of a pragmatist, my dear fellow, albeit a diabolical one. The phantom that so baffled Gregson was never a ghost. It was simply the ghost of Davis's past, given form and purpose by Moran. With Captain Davis providing intelligence from within, the impossible became merely difficult. Moran needed only to exploit the moments of chaos Davis created, a staged stumble, a dropped file, to launch his attacks and then melt away," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. He gestured with his pipe stem towards the mantelpiece, where lay the small, wicked-looking blow-dart we had recovered from the panelling in Lord Ashworth's study, resting upon a specimen tray. The weapon itself was a piece of theatrical misdirection, silent, exotic, untraceable. It was designed to create an air of mystery, to send Scotland Yard chasing shadows in the Orient, whilst the true culprit, a desperate English officer, stood at their very elbow, Sherlock Holmes said. "And Moran himself has vanished, as always. It is infuriating to know he walks free while Davies faces ruin," commented Dr. John Watson. Holmes's voice took on a sharper edge. "For now, Watson, the world is not so large that a man like Moran can hide forever. We have stripped him of his pawn and his profit in this particular enterprise. We have wounded him. A wounded tiger is at its most dangerous, but it also leaves a trail," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. As if summoned by his words, a sudden, sharp rap echoed from our front door downstairs, cutting through the comfortable quiet of the room. It was too late for a casual caller. We heard the shuffling footsteps of Mrs. Hudson, the click of the latch, and a brief, mumbled exchange. A moment later, her tread was on the stair, heavier than usual. She entered bearing a small, square package, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with coarse string. It bore the simple address, S. Holmes. "Thank you, Mrs. Hudson." "Left by a messenger boy, I presume," observed Sherlock Holmes. She nodded, her expression worried, and closed the door softly behind her. Holmes placed the package upon the table between us, examining it with an unnerving stillness. He produced a penknife and, with deft, precise movements, sliced the string. He unfolded the paper carefully, revealing not a letter, but a small velvet-lined box. With a flick of his thumb, he opened the lid. There, nestled against the dark fabric, lay a single, gleaming blow-dart, identical to the one on our mantelpiece. Beneath it was a small, folded card. Holmes picked it up, his face an emotionless mask, and read the 2 words written upon it in a bold, black script. He then passed it to me without comment. I took the card, my hand trembling slightly. The message was as concise as it was chilling. It read simply, "Next time."